Is it? I have made it. I have made it full screen. Is it visible?
Yeah, perfect, Madhu.
Okay, so welcome back, and thanks Sari and team Bridge Network for giving me this opportunity to share my thought on recently visited village called Gundri in Kalahandi district of Odisha, where I found the changing distinctiveness of the tribal communities, especially the, I mean, most of the caste tribe continuum study that has been done in India is talking about how the male, changes are taking place, may it be on the food, may it be on other things. But there is a very, interesting thought and observation of the tribal communities. As I will be moving on, this will be the content of presentation about Pond tribes in Odisha and Kalahandi district. Thoughts on Pond women changing social identity in Gundri village, concept of caste tribe continuum, and other examples that, the studies that has been done on caste tribe continuum and how it is related to my study. So this is how the flow of my talk will go on. Quite interestingly, when I was in a breakout room, I found out few of them were not much aware of the tribes. Who are the tribes? Why they are make so different and indigenous. So let me give you a small idea of the tribal communities and who are they. Basically, the tribal communities are known as aboriginals in many countries. In India, they are called Adivasis. Is my voice clear and loud? Okay.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, because there's a lot of noise. I'll just shut the door. Give me a minute. Okay, so basically, if you see the tribal communities in India are mostly on the hilly areas. So they, in some places, they are called as the mountaineers, and some would be called as I said, as Adivasis. And that's how make them so different from the general communities, those who live on the plain area. So one is on the plain areas would be very much modern. The eating habits will be very common, and the language will be very common. But in case of the tribal communities, they will have a different dialect. They will have a different song. They will have different food habits, even though they will be staying in the same state, may it be in Odisha or Maharashtra or any other tribal or Madhya Pradesh. So you will find a group of people who would be very much modernized in the living in the plain areas. And when if you go up to the hill, you will find these tribal communities who would be having a very different, very exotic kind of lifestyle. Having very minimum food habits, some for collecting from the forest, depending mostly on the forest resources. So that is what make them so indigenous. And their religion, if you see, is so very different to the general population of the same state. If you see the tribal communities in Orissa, they will be offering prayers to the forest or to a stone. But if you see the general caste groups, you will see they will be offering prayer to the god and goddesses. The idol worship is so common. So this is what make the tribal community so different. Now let us talk about the Kond tribe, who are the majorly dominated tribes of Orissa. So the Konds are the tribal groups found in hills and jungles of Orissa in eastern India. And they are termed as a Kond, Kondha, and they are known as the mountaineers. As I said, some of the tribes would be called as the mountaineers. And Kondo means hill. The Kond refers themselves their, own tongue as Q. Some tribes have, even if they are from the same tribal group, but they would have a different kind of a dialect. Kui would be different, like in Kond community, they would speak Kui language. Of course, there are several theories that have been put forward to explain the origin of Konds, but the Kond themselves believe that they are originated from Odisha. So the Kond is numerically as the largest tribe of Odisha. Even though if you move to other parts of maybe on eastern part or southern part or western part, you will find different kind of tribal communities. But in Odisha, the Kond are the largest, and there are sub clans like Dongriya Kond, Poroja, Pengu, Jharia, Desiya Kond. These are some of the sub clans. So as I said, there are two categories of tribals now. One who would be living on the hills and others who would have come to the plain areas. They mostly have migrated. And you will see the changes are mostly seen amongst the plain people who are no more living in the hilly areas. So the those who are living on the hills or the Malia Konds or the Dongriya Konds, they are having their original tribal culture. They would be speaking their own language, their food will be different to the plain areas. And my talk is focusing more on the plain Konds who are living in the plain areas and how things have changes, especially amongst the women, the changes have occurred. If you see the population of Kond in 2001, the Census of India record just over 1.4 million Konds in Odisha. Currently, this figure is closer to 1.5. You see the population trends of the Kond tribes here, how the population have increased, have doubled, because it's one of the populated, most densely largest population of tribal communities. Now, if you see this map, this is Odisha map, and we are here in Kalahandi. And if you see the almost all of Odisha, you will find some of the other tribes. The colors, if you see, some are below 10%, some are above 50%. Above 50% are Mayurbhanj, Sundargarh. I have worked in Mayurbhanj as well, some of the tribal communities in Mayurbhanj. My PhD work was with Mayurbhanj and Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh also is which is known as a central India, is also dominated with the largest tribal population. So if you see, Odisha has a largest number, not the population, the different groups of tribal communities you will find in Odisha. So this is how the tribal people you'll see in the population in Odisha. Now coming back to the typical feature of the Kond tribes. Who are these Kond tribal communities, where they are located in Kalahandi? So the Kutia Konds are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Earlier, Government of India have categorized two different types of tribal groups. One was one was PTGs, which are known as particularly tribal groups, primitive tribal groups. Later on, it was changed to particularly vulnerable tribal groups by the Government of India. So those tribal groups which are lesser in number and have a typical tribal features, and the population is also less amongst those, especially those PVTGs, are of 75 types in India. And in Odisha, there are 13 groups, PVTGs, who are very, having very less a population, and they are more, the poverty line is very low. Their income is very low, and they still practice their primitive way of cultivation. And this is how the Government of India has categorized them into PVTGs. And then there is this scheduled tribe. Scheduled tribe, you may find scheduled tribe may be very rich, may be very modern, may not be having the typical tribal characteristics. Not all the scheduled tribes would be having very modern way of living, but some of them who have migrated, as I said, in the plain areas, they are no more considered as a PVTG. So you will find, say for example, Juang. Juang is a PVTG, and Dongriya Kond is a PVTG community. But you will see the Juangs who are migrated to the plain areas, they will not be considered as a PVTG. So this is what has made government little critical to identify those people and give services to this community. Now, the Kond family is typically patrilineal, nuclear in structure. When women have are respected and are entitled to almost same privileges as men. Women manage the household plan. They usually, most Kond women would be um, you know would be busy with the collection. They're mostly with the domestic affairs or will be with the collection of the forest resources, and they will be attending the village councils and so on. And of course, the wives are acquired in several ways by mutual consent, elopement, capture, and through arranged marriage. This is the typical feature of Kond tribe. The Kond worship nature with, like many other tribal groups, they also worship, but how things have changed when they are in contact with the plane, which I'll be sharing in my next few slides. So women have, however, play a relative role in collection and processing of the forest produces, and they also go and sell those forest produces for their living. Bride price is again is very popular amongst the Kond, but now the dowry system has taken place amongst the Kond women, if you see. And why this has happened, let me take you to the field work that I done in the Gundri village. Basically, this is the field we took our students, where most of them are Kond tribe, and that's how I connected with Sari, and she came to know that I have taken my students to this village, and she was very excited to know what all observation I had. So I ended up coming, this topic. So Gundri village is located in Lanjigarh block of Kalahandi district, which has 150 households with a mixed community. When I say mixed community, there are tribes and caste living in one village. There will be caste groups and the tribal groups. Now, these tribal groups are mostly considered to be as a plain because they are no more in the hillside. They are mostly on the plain, which have come down. So if you see this, very interestingly, I found that in these villages, in fact, if you go to most of the tribe villages, mixed community villages, you will find different lanes in the village. They won't be staying in one particular, all of them won't be staying in one lane. You'll see that tribal groups will be staying in one lane. The higher caste groups will be staying in one lane, and the scheduled caste groups will be staying in one lane, because they still have this feeling of discrimination that they are lower groups. They are not similar to the higher caste group. So in this village, in Gundri village, I found, the Majipada, which are the tribal groups, the Paiko, which is the caste groups, and there is this Horijan. They are distributed in colony wise. Most of them is population are they practice cultivation, forest collection, and manual labor for living. This is how the village look like. Can you see the picture? If you see, this is one lane, this is one lane, this is one lane. So here where one caste group would be staying, here the tribal groups will be staying, and their housing pattern is also different, because if a caste group considered to be higher in comparison to the tribes, they would have a bigger houses and better houses than the tribal groups. Now see this housing pattern. This is what the caste groups would be having, with the kind of cemented house, more of a pakka houses. You see, this is the tribal groups. This is having how their kacha houses are made with mud, and these are the tiles. This is how you can distinct the caste groups and the tribal groups, how they live. Now let us come to this concept of caste tribe continuum, and why the caste tribe continuum. Because there are people living in one place, in one mixed community. This is a very interesting model suggested by F.G. Bailey and Sujit Sinha in 1960 to 1965. And they were very much influenced by Redfield concept of folk urban communities, Fijian society, and rural culture. So this is what Bailey has to say. The caste tribe continuum, The caste-tribe continuum is a polar ideal or type of construction which implies the no known society precisely corresponds to the description of the extreme ends, but all fall near one end or the other of the poles or in between. Even if they are in the one community, but they are, they fall near one end. Sometimes the caste groups, you will find the similar features of the tribes, and the tribes who have, in order to get a position in the community, they would be practicing the caste, some of the practices of the caste groups. So according to Belly, tribe and caste should be viewed as a continuum. He seeks to make distinction not in terms of totality of behavior, but in more limited way in relation to the political economic system. So what Bailey's argument was, the caste society is hierarchical, while a tribal society is segmentary and egalitarian. Even though they are in the same community, they would be practicing this egalitarian way, but when it comes to get the status or get the that position, they would try to merge, they would try to look alike like a tribal group, look like a caste group. So what are the social changes that I observed among the Kond women? So the Kond marriages rituals show the assimilation of many Hindu customs into the traditional tribal practices. Even though they have the tribal practices, they still be having some of the Hindu customs, like putting of sindoor, which is known as vermilion, offering prayer to Tulsi plant, which is also a typical typical caste groups way. So there are gender issues. Some come in close in contact with the Hindu neighbors and adopted many of their customs, such as demanding dowry, which, as I said earlier, there was a bride price. I'm sure all of you already know what bride price. Bride price where women get money from or gifts from the groom side, but dowry is typically where the groom demand, we want this and that for a marriage, which is now very much in practice in the Kond communities now. So the adoption of Hindu rites and ritual in order to get social acceptance by the caste groups, such as in Gunti village, the Konds give dowry and organize lucrative feast in order to get accepted by the higher caste groups, such as Paika. The Paika groups, which I mentioned, they would be, in order to get that acceptance, they would organize a big feast in order, even though they don't have that much of money to organize, they would borrow and they would organize such lucrative feast in order to get the position. So the Kond tribes appears adopting the Paika caste rites and rituals after constant contact with the caste groups. However, the Paika caste groups do not consider the Kond tribes of similar status, and they still discriminate. They discriminate in terms of the land, in terms of the festivals, like they won't participate. But however, these tribal groups, in order to get the equal status with the caste groups, they would try to assimilate with the caste groups in order to get accepted. For example, as I said, some of the women would try to dress up like caste groups, would be wearing bangles, would be wearing sindoor, would be wearing, in order to get. And now even the women who have a very typical tattoo on their body give the identification of the Kond tribe. Now the tattoo is also changing, which is becoming more modernized. Similar findings was also observed amongst the Kond tribe in Bisipada village, where F.G. Belly have done his work. We did a re-study of the village during 2012 and 13 when I was there in Anthropological Survey of India in Bisipada village. So there is a monograph we published after that. So we did find a similar kind of practices. And one of the very interesting fact during, my visit to this village, when I interacted with some of the tribal women in the Gundri village, they said we do fasting. We do not eat meat during some of the days, which is a very typical tribal, which is not a very typical tribal living, the practices. Because tribal people, they would drink, they would eat meat, they would dance, and will enjoy the festival. But when they have to be accepted by the tribal groups, they would do fasting. They would offer prayer to idols and they won't eat meat in order to get their acceptance. So this is how the tribal woman looks like. This is, you see, this is a typical Kond and this is a typical Kond tribal woman uh, on the hill areas. So this is how they look like. If you see, this woman is not wearing bangle. She's also not wearing bangle. She's having a tattoo. But this woman who is living in the plain area have started wearing bangles, you know. So this is what I was very fascinated when I visited, like how much they look, even though they are from the same community, they won't eat certain foods not to get accept, like which is not accepted by the caste groups, especially in the plain areas. But these people are very happy and they enjoy their time living on the hillside, and they would collect fish and forest produces. This is what is little the differences I found. So the other cases that was done on the caste-tribe continuum and the adoption to Hindu practices. So the tribes in India have influenced by certain traditions and community around them. Major neighboring community in all the areas have always been Hindus, and it is quite obvious that they will get, you know, they will definitely will start adopting. So as a result, they from the very period there have been several points of contact. So the nature of extent of contact, the pattern of mutual participation and characteristics civilization movements have been different in different parts of India. For example, this study done in two major central Himalayan tribes, Tharu and Khasa, revealed that though they have a tribal matrix and and continue to practice certain distinctive tribes customs, they have been accepted as Kshatriyas. Kshatriya is a caste uh, group. So their culture have been molded on the ways of living of Rajputs. The Rajputs and Brahmins are the castes, and the Tharu and Khasa is the tribes. If you see how Tharu and Khasa are now considered them as a Rajputs and Brahmins in order to practice this when they are practicing the Hindu. So the tribals declare themselves as Rajputs and Brahmins constitute the, appear to in the social order with a long and continuous contact with the regional Hindus caste. The tribals of Kharwas has long been assimilated as Rajput caste. So if you see, this typical example is the study which was done amongst the central Himalayan tribes is very much similar to my observation in the Gundri village of the Kond communities. So in conclusion, I would also try to highlight another study among the Santal community where the women are seen, they have accepted and adapted the lifestyles of the Hindu culture, like worshipping the Tulsi plants, observing certain ritual and calendar as per the Hindu calendars. But if you see typical tribal groups, they don't have those kind of calendar to be observed. Even if they would consider those months as auspicious, according to their own way, they have their certain months as a auspicious months where they offer prayer to goddess earth. If you see, this Kond has a typical practice of which is very popular amongst the Kond communities, offering they would sacrifice an animal. They will sacrifice a buffalo for this is called Dharani Penu. This typical tribal practices. But if you see these tribal groups, when they are coming to the plain areas, such kind of practices are going away. They are more adapting themselves to the Hindu ways and their caste groups and so on. So the tribe and caste in India are a result of ongoing process of interaction over a period of thousands of years and have borrowed each other to an extent that the line difference between both has diminished. So tribe and caste forms two ends of the same continuum in between of which the caste and tribal societies of India lie, but the same are not true for all societies, and also some are true and some are not true in all aspects of society. This is what some of the findings of different studies are saying. These are some of the sources where the information are taken from, especially the demographic profile of the cone, then some of the information from encyclopedia and so on. And yes, as Sari has mentioned, this is my book. And basically, this idea of editing this volume came from the ethnographic field work that I have done with different communities, maybe with the refugees, maybe with the tribal communities. So I decided why not to have a compilation of those of people who are working on different areas, maybe on science and technology, maybe on the management. Ethnography is so popular now. It is used in many aspects. Now it is used in artificial intelligence. People are borrowing the idea of, the methods of ethnography, and they are trying to work on different topics. So it's a very interesting book where people, experts who have been working on on different area using ethnography as a main tool. For example, digital ethnography, or maybe on the health, maybe on psychology. So this is a very interesting book compiled on different aspects. So you can recommend for your university library. You can purchase also. It is available. Now it is having the UK version, but soon there will be South Asian version, which will be a little cheaper in comparison to the UK version. And there is this conference, World Anthropology Congress, going to happen in Bhubaneswar, 9th to 14th August. 3 of my panels has been accepted, and it is showing online. If you are interested, you can of course submit an abstract, and they may have a virtual, those who are unable to visit, and it's a good opportunity. Those are really looking forward to visit India, and August is a really good time to visit. You can plan to visit, and this is the panels that I have proposed, and you can see in the website. This is my mail ID. If there is any queries related to the topic, conference, books, you can of course email me. Thank you.